I think that's what I wanted to say. If I'm correct, I don't remember really. When did I say this?
We'll come back. We have video also.
Yeah, we can.
Would you like to respond to the comment and the question?
I think, thank you for this wonderful, query. But what the point I'm trying to make that, I was not comparing. I'm saying that even the most affluence is not to survive, then what to say about the poor who has not yet begun. That's what a point I was trying to make. I was not comparing. My ambit of the talk was South Asia. So, I will restrict myself, because if you want another presentation on West, definitely you can say that. But, as a South Asian sociologist, looking West, I have concluded, still I'm taking it a very bold, I'm making a very bold statement, and I will stand by whatever you do today, that globalization is a failing ideology. That is my conclusion, and soon people will realize, and they've started realizing, Lehman was not a offbeat thing. Best mind put together could not stop its fall. And even today, President is making statement after statement that how they will recover, and they are not being able to recover. And second thing, if you go by sociologist Giddings, F.H. Giddings, he argues that he's still out of 211 countries of the world, 99 have only joined this process of globalization. 100 countries is still not part of this process of globalization. That means they understand that there is something wrong, there is some flaws. So I feel that this is too much celebration of a process. And of course, when the production of knowledge is bent towards one end, they can justify anything. They can use any means to justify. That's what I will take.
Maybe you can ask later on why, or you can tell us later on why that question is important to you.
Because my whole question was who is getting more benefit than
Of course, you can very well understand who gets actually. Because it's one-way process, no? Yeah. There's no way two-way process, one-way process only.
Professor, I have two questions. From what I could make out from your talk, are you suggesting that globalization is a cause for social exclusion? If yes, then I don't have a second question. But if no, then don't you think social exclusion should be considered on an individual standpoint rather than combining globalization and social exclusions? Because when we had Kshatriyas and Vaishyas and Harijans, the Kshatriyas were still amassing rubies and emeralds and fighting wars, and the Harijans were still cleaning out cow dung. Transport that 200 years later, I mean the multi-corporations of the world are still minting their money, and people who have to clean cow dung are still cleaning cow dung. So are you saying that globalization is the entity that has caused social exclusion, or social exclusion has always existed, will always exist, and needs to be looked at as a separate entity and not combined with globalization?
Great. Yeah.
So, again, I have two questions. One is actually not a question. I was looking at the child mortality rate in India. It's been a steady decline since 1960 all the way to 2010. So, I was not, after seeing the graph, it's almost a straight line going down. I'm actually very confused about what you said regarding child mortality rate and the effect globalization had on it in India. Yeah, if you can answer that.
Yeah, I'll take a third question.
So one of the states in India, Bihar, right, is the last 5 years has considered. So the poster child in terms of growth rate and all the good things that are happening with globalization in the poorest part of India. And it also happens to be the same state where there have been massacres of Dalits, organized pogroms against Dalits, whether it's Pathani Tola or Lakshman Gurbaate, They took lessons from this, the Ranveer Sena, and they were used in 2002 in Gujarat, or not to forget 1984 in Delhi. So, do you have any comments between this complex relationship that exists between globalization, the same forces, Nitish Kumar, and same forces that are actually there are the champions of globalization, yet are the defenders of, this really oppressive, caste-based system, in a place like Bihar?
Well, the first question, of course, I'm not making a statement that exclusion is because of globalization. But globalization has multiplied the effect of exclusion. That is my statement. It has increased the intensity. It has increased the levels of exclusion. Till yesterday, those people who were in radar that yes, government will do, state will do something. The state has retreated back, and it is retreating slowly and gradually much more faster today. So that is one I can definitely say. Now, when we say that, globalization is responsible for another way, Why? Because very selectively the politicians are making this statement that we have to do structural adjustment because we are being dictated by certain supra institutions, World Bank, IMF and all that, and we have to make these structural adjustment and we have to draw back. Globalization never says that you don't do your land reforms. But they are not doing it, and therefore, under the garb of process of globalization, they are taking away whatever little bit which was there for the excluded communities. This is what I wanted to say. The second thing is that in the process of globalization, the exclusion which was local has become global. And if you can do a study, you please go to shadi.coms. Just click it.
That's a translation for marriage sites.
Yes.
Matrimonial sites, websites, matrimonial websites. Now, in that context, what has happened? The caste has gone from real to virtual. And you see what happens, that people are asking spouses from caste within caste from subcastes. And so in Chicago, a father-in-law burnt his son-in-law, his daughter, and 2 kids just because somebody married lower caste. In Chicago it happened. I have my data. You can see New York Times on 8th of, I think, some 2008 case. You can see that. And you see B, Brahmin Samaj of North America. You just click that. You will see what statements they are writing. We want to make a network. We want to make a network of international community. This is what the statement they write. We want to give them opportunity, a platform to have matrimonial alliances. This is the website says. You can click on that. So I'm saying that how this whole process of local has become global, and it has become, it has a confluence of, you can say, primordial identities in which now achievement oriented, what we call as achievement oriented and universalistic principles are being roped in for primordial identities also. And it is in this context it becomes very, very difficult and heinous sometimes to pinpoint that really whether globalization is doing this. No, it's difficult to pinpoint because it becomes so sophisticated, very sophisticated. Now, as far as the child birth is concerned, I'm talking, you were talking about infant mortality rate. I'm only talking about how the birth which are related to hunger and other diseases. That's what particular data may be not matching. But mortality is different. Now, the third Bihar story, I don't know which indicators you are talking. Because a economic principle is that growth, a high growth on a small base is not at all. It will not hard lockdown. It will not last very long. On a small base, there is no industry which has come to Bihar till date. Not even a single industry has come there. And development without industry, for me, it's difficult to understand. Difficult. Second thing, what has gone there is only construction of roads. And construction of road is not a state's policy. It is central's policy, the money which is lying down there. Now what you are talking, which I can say is that governance has changed. And that is giving a space, UP is equivalent according to RBI report. UP's growth rate was, equivalent to national level. But no paper highlighted that. Nowhere it got highlighted. But Bihar, with a special case, with a special effort, and
Special bias.
no, I will say that politics of media. How politics of media tried to highlight that case is something to adhere. And is still the status of Dalits, if you see, the same way they are being butchered. It's that it is not being reported. The group actually, murder happened long back in Lakshmanpur Bate. During Lalu's period, no group murder took place. And poverty also reduced in Bihar. That is also true. So the point here is, if you see that, democracy versus governance, I am a votary of democracy rather than governance. I will remain with the people. At least people had voice. Today, people do not have a voice. What the whole rule has coming back. They are only talking about, chief minister going everywhere. If chief minister goes and sits and gives chief minister goes and sits and gives a Janta Darbar, he has a Janta Darbar, people think that, look, administration has come to your end. But that is not the case. Why democracy should not be there at your own door? Why chief minister has to come to your door? So I have still very early, it's too early to celebrate Bihar as a case of development.
But I was being facetious when I was saying it was the poster child.
Thanks.
Ambedkar in 1946, when he spoke, Dr. Ambedkar, the Constituent Assembly said that social justice in India can never become a reality unless you have a socialist economy. My question to you is, are mainstream Dalit leaders, based on identity politics, are they doing a great disservice to the Dalit community by dissociating the class struggle from the Dalit struggle for dignity and self-respect? Because recently in Bathani Tola that he just mentioned, the High Court overturned the judgment of the Sessions Court. In 1996, 20 Dalits were killed, as you know, in Bathani Tola by the Ranveer Sena. And essentially, these Dalits were asserting themselves and they were associating with CPIML. So it was a great threat to the ruling powers that the Dalit community was asserting for independence and was talking about class struggle. So basically my question to you is, are the mainstream Dalit leaders doing a great disservice by dissociating the class struggle from the Dalit struggle?
No. Big no. Why? Why? Because actually, what has happened that the Dalits, which had nothing at their disposal except identity, that they are what? They had one power, and that was vote. That's what was given. And despite of all drawbacks, they started learning. They started learning the tricks of the trade that was democracy, or that is democracy now. They started learning, and they have learned the lesson in such a big manner that they formulated their own political party and they have won the election. This is one story. And thereby they have contributed in strengthening the Indian democracy. Now you are talking about a class struggle which doesn't believe in democracy at all. Neither within, neither outside. They want to demolish the state itself. Now if you are talking about Ambedkar, Ambedkar did talk about a socialist economy. But in the end, he also argued that there are other views to create. There are other milieus which to create a democracy. And this was political, social, economic, and of course, educational. All these institutions have to be made democratized. But the issue of class struggle, which you are talking, I fail to understand that how it strengthens Indian democracy. Indian democracy is much more strengthened by people participating in it. Those who were excluded for centuries, they started participating now. And I think participation is making much more fruitful an exercise rather than taking an arms. And within an arms, you have not come to the story, inside story. I interviewed Dalits who were part of CPI-ML with arms. And what they have to say? They argued that when we organized an area and when it came for our promotion, they refused to us a promotion. They sent us in another area to organize in a new area. Even the Sten guns, even the SLRs distributed on the basis of caste.
This was not, in Bathani Tola, they did not have arms.
No, I'm not talking about. You are talking about the culmination of class struggle. Where will it lead? Where will it lead? Class struggle will lead somewhere else. It is not going to be ending there. Class struggle will end up, I'm saying in arms struggle, where 158 districts of India are unapproachable even today. If I have understood you correctly. No? Okay.
Maybe we'll come back to you.
Sir?
Yeah, just pause.
Yeah, I have a couple of conceptual questions and comments. I'm a philosopher and also banking consultant, so I come from both sides. So thank you very much for Vivek, for thought-provoking presentation. This narrative of modernity and tradition is actually very suspect. And that all arguments for that it is completely bogus and has really no real basis in terms of it's a construct, that 18th century, 17th century empire builders had to construct a narrative. So, you can't take it seriously as a discipline. And second thing is this globalization. This is not the first time a globalization process has started. You look at Buddha's time, India, South Asia is going through a huge globalization process. But this globalization, we are actually, to be precise, it is march of the global capital. And this global capital cannot overcome its own contradictions, number one. And number two, its own dynamism. And number three, it is unsustainable. So if you look when it starts from, like Holland and Italy and Germany in 18th century, goes to Ireland, Scotland, Wales, this is what precisely it did, what it's doing other parts of the world. And so I'm glad, you're raising this question for us as South Asians to really ponder over that, which way as a people we are going to go. Because it is being ballyhooed all over the place, something great is happening, shining India and all those things. But, when you sort of dissect and see at the core of what it is, part of its dynamism is this intensification of exclusions of vast majority of people. So I mean, what is taking place? Like, it's not surprising this is the way it is going. So my question to you that as a people, how do we deal with it in terms of in a material sensuous activity as well as in terms of spiritually? How do we do it?
It's actually related, it goes on from that point and arrives at the same question. You were saying yourself that you don't believe that globalization is sustainable. You quoted Lehman's as a specific example of that, of a self-destruct. Considering that India will be spending $1 trillion in the next 5 years on globalization-oriented infrastructure development, which goes basically into the cities and urbanization of the new system, the new modern system, to the exclusion of the majority of Indians who will be neglected. How do you think this will end up if it doesn't receive attention on the level that Professor Jaspal just mentioned?
As a polytheory teacher, it's very difficult for me to understand, really, because this war is such a gingentic war, and I say it as a war, actually, a battle. It is a gingentic war, as you see that the whole world is pinning their hope, and world I'm talking about quote unquote selected group of the world. They are pinning their hope, and I think that's what the world order runs. And therefore, what happens that these constructions, they are backed by, heavy knowledge production, produce books after books, theories after theories. We used to hear about structural functional theory then, and how structural functional theory was created scientifically, and how even in racism, how scientific theories were created, that how the blacks were inferior. So I think these theories we are up against theories, and what resources we have. It's good that some people ask me to speak, because I have been speaking this in my country for so many years. So I got an audience, and I think you are so, you people are listening me so carefully. I'm really happy for that only. So as a small teacher of a university, I have only one weapon, that I can speak the truth, whatever little bit I have. But of course, it is exploitative. In the rooftop, or actually, even in Empire State Building, I'll go and shout that it is really exploitative. It is exclusionary. It is exclusionary not only individual, but countries as well. Sir.
I have one very simple question I wanted to ask. You spoke of two kinds of anti-colonialism, and I understood one of the words, replicative, but I tried as I could, I didn't get the other one.
Retreatist.
Retreatist.
Yeah, retreatist. They went, they stayed for some time, left their remnants, and came back without wiping it out.
I see. Then I had something else to say about this issue of modern globalization, the modern globalization aggravating the exclusion problem. I think it has to do with the non-sustainability. The ideology used to be that it was not a zero-sum game, that there's going to be more and more. So as the richer got richer, the poorer would come along, would all trickle down, everyone would be better off, the pie would get bigger and bigger. But now there are ecological hedging, and people are worried about ecological limits to this. The world population is going to be 9-10 times as big as it was in 1800. And I think a lot of people who are in the middle class and above are worried that it's a zero-sum game. There's not going to be enough for everybody, and that is causing them to be willing to exclude the others. I think it has to do with the fear that it's a zero-sum game that we're getting into because of the ecological limits.
That's a sad indictment on mankind, isn't it? Just to go straight for exclusion.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah.
That's fine. I think you have a point, of course. Ecology and environment is, of course, an integral part. You can make flyover once, you can broaden the road once, Yeah. But how long you will be keep on broadening the road and making flyovers? One day it will have to come down.
Before we take questions from people who have asked before, I'd like to take questions from people who have not asked before. So there, and at the back. So can we start with you?
You mentioned that because of globalization, third world countries are becoming passive recipients of culture. So they are.
I will not say.
Okay.
It seems that they are. Yeah.
Okay. So because of which a lot of these third world countries are, as you spoke about, Hindi pop, Punjabi pop, becoming hybridization, and in spite of, along with globalization comes a lot of knowledge. There is a lot of awareness. So how should a society change, or what can we bring about in a society that they don't really are passive recipients, but they try to understand, engage, and try to come up with, like India, doesn't come up with an idea. I mean, it has to be like a role model for developing countries. That's what I want India to be, a role model, not just take whatever is coming from the West and inculcate it into the society. So how do we bring about a change in society? What can be done? Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I don't have questions, but some points on what Professor.
Some points.
Yeah,
if you can be brief.
Brief. Yeah. So talking about this matrimony thing, I just want to add to Professor. If we Google that, if you are searching for a bride or a groom, and if you Google SC, ST, OBC excluded, or
can you just expand it for everybody?
Yeah,
so
I think they might.
Scheduled tribe.
Yeah, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward class candidates. Please excuse. If you Google that, you will find 57,000 entries. And if you Google scheduled caste and scheduled tribes excluded or excused, you will find 147,000 entries. So this is globalization as of today. About the Tendulkar Committee report, again based on P. Sainath's, he is an excellent, fabulous rural editor. He also makes a very good point about the committees that are appointed by Government of India. 7, 8, 10, 12 committees are appointed for the same purpose until they deliver the report what the government wants to show. Thirdly, about the agriculture, the shift from now, as Professor cited out that the farmers have moved from agriculture. Adding on to that, our shift and focus from food crops has gone drastically up. Now we are getting into cash crops. We are getting into an insufficient supply of food for our own country. That has been very highly encouraged by the corporates. Shift from food crops to cash crops. And then, like, US is a vanilla country. It's a vanilla nation. If you see the pattern in South India, the shift from food crops has drastically gone to production of vanilla, which Indians hardly consume. So where are we at globalization? Being insufficient in food and then borrowing it from other countries at exorbitant cost, where only the affluent can afford to eat that food. Yeah, that's it.
Any comments?
No, I think that's fine.
Thank you.
Professor, you told that so many farmers, millions of farmers stop the cultivation and farming, and we also hear or read in the newspaper that so many farmers are committing suicide. And at the same time, the average salary of something poor people is around 19 rupees per day. If I go to India, the 19 rupees is basically you get a cup of tea. So I don't know, it's at the same time there is many people, many malls coming up, and people are buying the things like anything. So there must be something going on there. The rich people are going very rich, poor people are going very poor. And I don't know at what stage these poor people cannot afford anything, they can't get any food and all this. So do you envisage any civil war between these poor people and the rich people in the future?
Well, you have a very difficult question.